Welcome, Pastor, as he brings the word today. Whoa. Now, I'm going to be giving you more of a college-level lecture today. I want you to pay close attention, and I'm going to have a lot of scripture on the board. You can take and I won't read them all, but I will tell you what they say, and you can check me out when you get home. The sermon is called The End from the Beginning, and it comes from Isaiah 46, verses 8 through 11. I want you to listen close to the text. God is reminding them. Remember this, he says. Don't forget it. And show yourselves men. And bring it again to mind, you transgressors, you sinners. Pay attention, he said. Remember, verse 9, the former things of old. Remember what I've done in the past. For I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me. For I, God, declaring the end from the beginning, and from the ancient times, I've told you things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do my pleasure. And the last part of verse 11, I have spoken it, and I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, and I will also do it. Now today, the whole purpose of this message, and it will be very detailed, is to build your faith so that you can see how God keeps His word, He honors His covenants, and He will always keep His blessing. His word is forever settled in heaven. All of the religions of the world will tell you what has happened. Only God would dare to tell you what's going to happen. There is none like Him. He puts His reputation and His authority on the line by telling you things that are going to happen before they happen. God knows the end from the beginning. We know that. We understand that. He knows what's happened yesterday, what's happening right now, and He knows what's going to happen tomorrow. He knows the end from the beginning. The question is, does God tell anybody else what He's doing, why He's doing it, and when He's going to do it? Does God set dates? Does God make covenants and honor those covenants with a time frame? And does He do it on time? So that's the question. Does God knows the end from the beginning, but does He ever tell anybody else? God set a date for the flood. He told Enoch, Methuselah, and Noah what he was doing, why he was doing it, and when he was going to do it. Let me ask you a question. How many of you know who the oldest man in the Bible was that ever lived? Methuselah. You know how long he lived? 969 years. You know, if I could live that many years, I might know something. By the time you're old enough to know something, you're too old to do anything about what you know. It's ridiculous. Let me throw you a curve. Who was the oldest man that ever lived, and yet his father outlived him? Boy, that would be Enoch. Enoch was Methuselah's father, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch did not die. Hey, I just thought I'd throw that in. God also set a date for the destruction of Sodom. And he told Abraham and Lot what he was doing, why he was doing it, and when he was going to do it. Now, let's get a little more technical. I want you to see how God keeps his word. God set a day for Isaac to be born, and he told Abraham and Sarah about it, what he was going to do and why he was doing it, and when he was going to do it. In Genesis 17, verse 21, listen closely. My covenant I will establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear at this time next year. She's going to give birth. Now, they're old. Abraham and Sarah is old. He said she's going to give birth at this time next year. Genesis 21:2 says, Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age at the set time which God had spoken to him. He gave him a date, said this time next year, Sarah's going to have a baby. His name is Isaac. And that time next year, she had a baby and named him Isaac. But give you another one. Galatians 3, this fascinating me. I think it will bless you and encourage you and strengthen your faith. Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. To Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He made some promises to Abraham that through Abraham would come the Messiah that would bless the whole world. Now, he made that promise to Abraham. Skip down to verse 17. And the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the promise that he made to Abraham about the Christ, was given before the law, which was 430 years after, and the law cannot disannul that it should make the promise of none effect. The law came 400 years after God gave the promise to Abraham. Now, why is that important? This is important because this 430 years was a fulfillment that God made to Abraham. I want you to go back to Genesis 15. Okay, God told Abraham, and I'm down in verse 7 and 15. I had to go back and see where it started. Said, I'm the God that brought you out of the land of Ur of the Chaldees. And this land that you're in now, I'm giving to you for an inheritance. I've given you this land. Abraham, being a little skeptical, said, how do I know this is going to be my inheritance for my generations? And God put Abraham to sleep. Great darkness came on him down in verse 12. And God said to Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. Now remember what Paul said in Galatians. The law was given 400 years after the promise was made to Abraham. This is the promise that was made to Abraham. But in verse 16, in the fourth generation, they will be brought out again. This is the guarantee. If I keep this guarantee, Abraham, then you know that all of your generations will inherit this land. It will be theirs. Now, if you follow this, God told Abraham that his descendants would go into a strange land. They would live among strangers. They would become slaves. And in the fourth generation, they would enter again to the promised land. Now, they would be afflicted for 400 years. The prophecy began. Am I boring you so far? The prophecy would begin when Joseph brought Jacob and his family, all of his family, down to Egypt. Now, remember, they were not slaves in the beginning. Joseph was prime minister. He was Pharaoh's favorite. And when they came, he brought his family down. his family they were called kings. In fact, they were named them Hebrew, which means wanderers. They were wandering kings. They were treated like kings until that Pharaoh died. And the new Pharaoh come on, and the Israelites, the wanderers, the Hebrews, were gaining such power and influence. He said, we've got to stop this or they'll take over the kingdom. So he made them slaves. So 30 years passed. That's important. 30 years passed. They were not slaves in the beginning. The fulfillment of the prophecy would take place and be complete in 430 years. That prophecy was fulfilled to the exact day. In Exodus 12, verse 40. And the journeying of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And at the end of 430 years, even the self-same day, it came to pass that all of the host of the Lord went out from Egypt, from the land of Egypt. God promised Abraham, this is how you're going to know. Now it's interesting that the ambassador from the United Nations, ambassador before the United Nations, they asked him, how does he prove that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews? And all he did was hold up his Bible. That was God's promise. The only nation on the planet that has a right to claim the land that they possess is the nation of Israel. He gave them that land. Now, he said, you'll go into slavery, you'll go to Egypt, you'll go into slavery, you'll serve them 400 years, and at the end of that time, in the fourth generation, I will bring you out and bring you back to this land. That's interesting to me. Let me give you another one. God said, it's going to get more interesting as we go along. God set a date for the Jews to go into captivity to Babylon and when they would come out. Now, this goes to Jeremiah. Now, if I get to boring you, we can just quit anytime. Jeremiah 25, verse 1. Now, this is when Israel would go into captivity to Babylon. The reason this is important because he gives them an exact date of how long they will be in bondage. The word came to Jeremiah concerning the people of Judah, the Jews, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah. Jehoiakim was king in the 4th year of his reign, and in the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign as king of Babylon. Now, if you go down to verse 11, said, the land will be a desolation, and you will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Now, he said, you're going to go into captivity because you've rebelled against me. And you're going to be there for 70 years. Now, we have 2 reference points. Jehoiakim's 4th year of reigning, Nebuchadnezzar's 1st year, 2 points of reference. We know that that took place in the year 496 BC. And it was supposed to last 70 years. The servitude ended with the decree of Cyrus to rebuild the temple. That took place in 426 BC. 496 minus 426 leaves exactly 70 years. God keeps his word. To give you another one. God set dates for the rise and fall of the kingdoms of this earth. Nebuchadnezzar the king had a dream, and he couldn't remember the dream. And all of his astrologers and soothsayers and all of that could not give him the interpretation of the dream. They said, tell us a dream, we'll tell you what it means. He said, I don't know the dream. Tell me what I dreamed. He killed them all. Remember Daniel. Daniel and his companions prayed that God would give him the wisdom to answer. God told him what the dream was, and he tells Nebuchadnezzar, he said, here's the dream that you had. You had a dream of an image, a great statue. It had a gold head. It had arms and breast of silver, had stomach and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet and toes of iron and clay mixed. And he said, this is the interpretation. And Daniel told him, he said, Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. You, the Babylonian kingdom, is the head of gold. But that kingdom will give way to the two double kingdom, the breast and arms of silver. That will be the Medes, the Persian, Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes and the Persians would join together, the two arms, and they would conquer Babylon and rule. Now, he said, that will give way to the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great. He said, and that one will give way to the Roman Empire, the two legs of the Roman Empire. And that one will give way to the last and final kingdoms of this earth, the revival of that kingdom of the Roman Empire, and the feet and toes loosely held together, called the kingdoms of iron and clay. Now, let's go and look just a little deeper into this and show you what happens. In Jeremiah 27, verse 7, it says, all of the nations will serve Nebuchadnezzar and his son and his son's son. He tells them how long Nebuchadnezzar will rule. The Babylonian Empire will rule. To the third generation, to be Nebuchadnezzar, his son, and his grandson. The third generation. So that empire would fall in the third generation. Daniel 5, verse 30 and 31, says the night that Belshazzar was slain. Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, the third generation. That night that he was slain, Darius of the Median, Darius the Mede, that's when they took over and took the kingdom. And the prophecy was fulfilled in the third generation, just like God said. Now, God told Daniel that the Medo-Persian Empire would fall to the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great, and he would take over. Now, that's from Daniel 8, and I'm afraid if I get in there, we won't get through till 2 o'clock. Let's save that, and I'll come back to it another time. He set a date, also set a date for Jesus to be born. He told Daniel about it. He told Mary, Joseph, and he told Simeon the priest when Christ was going to be born. You can look up Luke 2, 26 through 32. I'm going to go through these real quick for a minute. God set a date for the crucifixion of Jesus and told Daniel about it. It was at the 69 weeks would end with the cutting off of Messiah. And there would be a gap from there until the last 70th week. We'll go back to Daniel and cover that in prophecy later on. We'll do that the first Sunday you miss. That prophecy was to begin with the fourth commandment to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, this is, if you see this in Daniel 8, go home and read Daniel 8. You probably won't understand what he's talking about, but we can have some fun with it later. Let me give you one more. God set a date for the times of the Gentiles to be fulfilled. Leviticus 26:18. God said, if Israel will not hearken to me, they won't pay attention to me, they go against me, they go against my word, against my law, they rebel, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. Verse 33 tells them what he's going to do if they don't pay attention to him. He said, I will scatter you among the heathen, and your land will be desolate, and your cities will be waste. Now let me show you something. Hebrew year is 360 days. It's called the lunar year. They have 30 days each month. It's a 360-day year. Now, they count from Passover to Passover. Passover, beginning of the year. He said, I will punish you 7 times. That would be 360 times 7. That would be 2,520 years. I will punish you for 2,520 years. And your land will lay fallow. 2 Kings 24 tells about how Nebuchadnezzar come down, conquered Israel, and he took all of it. He took all of the choice people from Israel captive. And he took them back to Babylon. He took all of the leaders. He took all of the artisans, all of the skilled workers, all of the educated. He took the cream of the people. And this was when Daniel and his companions were taken captive. He took them back, along with all of the gold, the silver. He even took all of the treasures, the gold and silver from the temple. And besides that, you never hear about the Ark of the Covenant again. You don't hear about it being in the temple again after this event. This is a significant event. This took place. We know when this took place. It took place in 603 BC, in December. December of 603 BC. In December 1917, at the end of World War I, the Allied armies under General Allenby marched into Jerusalem and captured Jerusalem, the city, from the Turks. 603 BC plus 1917, 2,520 years. Exactly. December to the month, very month. And if we could prove it, it'd probably be to the very day. This builds my faith. I don't know what it does to you, but it builds my faith to see how God fulfills His prophecy. He keeps His word. When He makes a covenant, you can guarantee it will be kept. Let me give you one more. Can you handle one more? God set a date for the Jewish people to reclaim Jerusalem, the city, the holy city. This is God's city. He chose it. In Daniel 8, verse 13 and 14, a messenger came to Daniel with a message. And Daniel asked him a question. How long shall the transgression of the desolation of the sanctuary be trodden underfoot? How long is this? We're going to have to let this city be in the hands of the Gentiles. Now, this invasion took place this is Alexander the Great. After he conquered that part of the world, the Gentiles would control Jerusalem for 2,300 years. And the angel told Daniel, when he said, how long will the desolation, how long will this city be considered desolate, not under control of the Jewish people that God gave it to? He answered me, he said, 2,300 days or 2,300 years. You have to take what he's saying now, understand it. Let me show you how this works. In 1967, June of 1967, the 6-day war, Israel took possession of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,300 days. 303 BC, when Alexander took control of the Holy Land, the Gentiles ruled that country. 333 BC to 1967 is exactly 2,300 years. Fascinating. Isaiah 46:10, declaring the end from the beginning. And from ancient times I've told you of things that were not yet been done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do my pleasure. Now, I skipped some of these because I don't want to bore you with it. God, what's the point of the message, Mack? The point of the message is God's still on the throne. He's still the boss. He's still in control. And one day he promised he was coming back. Acts chapter 1, when the crowd had gathered at on the mountain and Jesus transcended into heaven, the two angels appeared. Everybody was standing there. 500 were standing there in Galilee looking up. And they appeared and said, why do you stand here gazing upward? This same Jesus that you saw leaving is coming back again in the same way. So he's coming back. I want to show you some things from the New Testament, not today, we don't have time. But one day Jesus is coming back. He's coming back in great power and glory, and written on his thigh is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And one day, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and we which are alive and remain will be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air. That's his promise. That's his covenant, and it's going to happen. I was asked if I would read the poem that I wrote again. Some have wanted me to copy it. I haven't made sure I want to put it out in public yet, but I wrote this poem. To my remembrance, I've never written a poem before this in my life. It's called The Forbidden Sea. Sometimes I wonder how it will be when I cross the forbidden sea. I've walked through fire, but I've never been burned. But I've heard angels sing when I've been alone. I've been homesick, but I've never been home. And sometimes I wonder how it will be when I cross the forbidden sea. From birth to death, we walk between the two eternities. The eternity that was before and the eternity that will always be. There is nothing as unforgiving as time. I have been forgiven, but I'm running out of time. And sometimes I wonder how it will be when I cross the forbidden sea. We have the promise and the covenant made that he's coming back. Dead or alive, I plan to meet him in the air.